Well guys, after a couple weeks with Delta Force's open beta, it's time to really talk. While I've given my first impressions on both the PC alpha and now beta, I've kept those videos a little shorter. However, today I wanted to really get into the weeds. Delta Force marks a rather huge entry into the AAA space, and as a self-proclaimed core FPS fan, I wanted to really dive into detail. Now, I've been playing big FPS titles like Battlefield, Halo, Call of Duty, and Medal of Honor since I picked up a controller decades ago. And over the past few years, I've gotten into PC gaming with slightly more hardcore, or at least slightly more sweaty games like Insurgency, Apex, and the Finals. This review isn't that of a PC streamer or a hardcore FPS pro. Instead, this review is from a player who wants a fulfilling and engaging modern military shooter that can be binged for hours with his friends across platforms with little to no barrier to entry. This review is an everyman's discussion about some of the good, the bad, and the ugly of what could be the next big cross-platform military shooter. So guys, if you like Battlefield and Delta Force, hit subscribe and let's get into it. First and foremost, let's talk about what Delta Force is setting out to accomplish. And this is where things immediately get messy. Delta Force, in many ways, is trying to please all FPS fans all the time. While the game is essentially a Battlefield clone with 64-player multiplayer, mixed vehicle and infantry warfare, and a 4-man squad system. The game also includes an extraction shooter similar to Gray Zone, ranked matchmaking like Call of Duty, gunsmithing akin to Ghost Recon, a weapon skin economy like Counter-Strike, and a single-player campaign that has yet to be released. And all of this is wrapped up in a free-to-play package that includes a deep progression system, more mil-sim-ish gunplay, and even 2042-type specialists. Delta Force is really looking to have its cake and eat it too, and as we'll discuss, it mostly works out. Right off the bat, let's talk about the meat and potatoes of Delta Force. The game's core multiplayer titled Warfare is, in all honesty, a free-to-play Battlefield clone. 64 players, conquest and breakthrough style game modes, 4-man squads, weapon restrictions on each class, and even specialist style operators who all have their own gadgets like spawn beacons, ammo crates, and stim guns. However, Warfare sadly does little to improve upon the Battlefield formula. The game modes are generally the same, the spawn menu is copy-paste, and new additions like skill-based matchmaking hurt the casual appeal. While the maps are serviceable with more lanes, depth, and often more detail than most of 2042's original few, Delta Force's environments are rather uninspired. And the same thing can be said for the game's recreation of the Battlefield specialists. Delta Force's operators feel a little cartoonish with little in the way of mature personalities, nor compelling performances for such an otherwise serious game. However, from a gameplay perspective, the operators are tried and true archetypes that we see in games like Battlefield, with medic, recon, assault, and engineer classes, which create a structure for weapon types, abilities, grenades, and gadgets that are almost identical to recent Battlefields. Ultimately, you can tell that Delta Force's leadership is attempting the same sort of character design that Battlefield did while also falling into the same traps. If specialists were a huge pain point for you in Battlefield, then Delta Force's operators will almost certainly rub you the wrong way. Granted, operators may be one of the easiest things for the developers at Team Jade to fix. New voice lines, better third-person animations, and the introduction of more cosmetics should help break up the repetition of so many annoying characters. But it's a shame because the gameplay is rather solid and, for lack of a better term, mature. I've typically described Delta Force's gunplay as a mix of Battlefield and Insurgency. A slightly faster time to kill with more consistent weapons, while having more speed and agility akin to a casual game like Battlefield. As of right now, before the meta has fully settled, the gameplay is a little more structured with a focus on accuracy, positioning, and weapon crafting. But you also have to take into consideration the horrible footstep audio, super deadly vehicles, and rebalances to come.
Objective Charlie 1 is out. The enemy has captured objective Charlie.
If you want a casual boots-on-the-ground military experience, Delta Force is a fine option, especially with its free price tag. However, understand what you're getting into, especially when it comes to the classic warfare mode. This is a Chinese-produced title developed on the Unreal game engine with a big focus on mobile support, and you can feel that. There's certain moments in the gunplay and visuals that feel like they're made for advertising, not gameplay. At the end of the day, Delta Force is a Chinese multi-platform game made by Tencent, the juggernaut behind League of Legends and Call of Duty Mobile, and you can tell. There's a certain art style and clear focus on the operators that feels ripe for exploitation, whether that's in marketing or microtransactions, but that's something you may have to judge for yourself. While the game limits destruction, perhaps to the benefits of balancing powerful vehicles, Delta Force copies the end-of-round screens, spawn menu, and many other visual aspects of their competitors, again adding to the sensation that it's indeed a free-to-play copy of other legendary franchises. All in all, the warfare mode in Delta Force is what I'd describe as serviceable and fun. And in today's market, that's pretty remarkable. Team Jade needs to build upon this success with more unique maps, modes, and operators, eventually creating their own identity. With so much at stake, I feel like leadership is terrified of failing, so they're just copying what works, but at this point they're in a really solid place, so I'd encourage them to let their hair down and go wild. There's a really solid base, it just needs more personality and refinement in its gameplay. Now, jumping over to Delta Force's extraction mode operations, and I'd say that this is where the game starts to shine. On the surface, operations isn't much different than any other extraction mode. While playing as your selected operator, you begin your session in the forward operating base titled the Black Site, where you purchase weapons, find a party, and gear up before deploying to one of several unique environments with a corresponding difficulty level. Upon arrival, you drop in via helicopter, go boots on the ground, and start working your way through the map, where you can encounter AI soldiers, mini-bosses, player contracts, collectible items, and occasionally enemy players. After filling your backpack and surviving the wasteland, you'll have to work your way to an extraction point, which is either persistently available or enabled via a series of actions, like connecting a breaker box to open an elevator. Once extracted, you can parse through your loot, either selling, vaulting, or auctioning away your leftover gear. You can then use these looted items to upgrade your black site, thus adding perks to your gameplay. Then rinse and repeat. Operations represents a rather well-paced, complex, and polished extraction experience, especially for a multi-platform shooter. While no one aspect of Operations is groundbreaking, the overall experience is a unique addition that continues to round out a more complete title. Again, throw in the incredible weapon customization, complexity of upgrades, and the player-driven auction house, and you've got not just a complete experience, but also a living and breathing one. Also, to my senses, Operations allows the gunplay to shine more so than in Warfare. The slower pace, complex map design, and dense enemy count keep the player engaged way more than Hazard Zone, while also allowing for much more player agency than the simple run-and-gun style of Warzone. The game mode strikes a solid balance where it looks to bring a more complex extraction shooter to a more casual player base across PC, console, and mobile. Now, while Delta Force's operators may fall flat as characters, that's fine because at the end of the day, the weapons are the real star of the show. With a great attention to detail and a level of customization that can feature over 100 attachments per firearm, Delta Force's gunsmith puts games like Battlefield to shame. And while the game's total weapon count isn't mind-blowing, coming in at just around 40, the game allows such depth that overhauling weapons with conversion kits and entirely new handguards, receivers, and barrels is commonplace. Even the base assault rifle, the CAR-15, has 24 optics including risers which adjust the player's cheek weld. While Delta Force certainly can have its cheap, mobile game-esque moments, the weapons are the complete opposite. With pages of stats, thousands of attachments, a nifty firing range, and the ability to adjust your weapon down to the millimeter, the game's weapons are a labor of love. And I'm not kidding about this game's attention to detail. In fact, here's a clip of me adjusting my weapon inch by inch in order to see which stats are affected and how. This game's weapons are absolutely its high point, and taking this level of weapon crafting and allowing the player to choose their own adventure between warfare and operations really allows each player to craft and experience their firearm however they dream. But there's a catch. Now, of course, being a free-to-play game, Delta Force needs to make money somewhere, and that comes in the form of not just cosmetic bundles, but also a weapon skin economy similar to Counter-Strike. Now, I'm not a Counter-Strike player, but I could see this sort of marketplace becoming a heavy focus for the developers, eventually overwhelming the discourse around the game and turning away casual players, especially those who are coming from Battlefield. Paid cosmetics will always be contentious, especially for Battlefield fans, but this is again an example of Delta Force trying to please everyone, and this is their shot at the hardcore financially invested superfans. So while the cosmetics look incredible and the weapon crafting system is second to none, I certainly have my reservations about Tencent's focus when it comes to Delta Force's most promising component. Shifting gears into a totally different topic, I know graphics aren't everything, but when a newcomer tries to disrupt such a competitive market, it's only fair to talk about it. Now, I know not everyone will agree, but by the end of Battlefield 2042's life cycle, I thought the game looked pretty damn good. Your mileage may vary, but at max settings on a RTX 4090 machine, Battlefield performed pretty well and looked pretty great doing it. However, Delta Force is a noticeable downgrade with some questionable lighting, shaky performance, and rough character models while in-game. While Delta Force is still a good-looking game, it feels inconsistent and uneven, especially for a game that runs on Unreal 4 in multiplayer and Unreal 5 in the upcoming single-player campaign. The one caveat is, again, the weapons, which are some of the best you'll see in any first-person shooter to date. With such a focus on weapon skins, I'd imagine the team dumped a lot of their budget into the weapon models and lighting in the menus. I'm often hovering around 100 FPS at 4K max settings, but typically encounter stuttering during both gameplay and in-game cutscenes. I still can't tell if this is an optimization issue or network lag, as I don't ever see anything notable in my performance overlay. So again, your mileage may vary, but in general, Delta Force looks better than something like Insurgency, but still noticeably cheaper than games like Battlefield. The creative direction, menus, and artwork are all serviceable, but continue the feeling of a ever so slightly B-list title, a true we have Battlefield at home aesthetic. Now, to wrap up my thoughts, this is what I'll say. Delta Force is off to a great start. It offers more content and more gameplay depth in its first couple weeks than 2042 did after years of support. And while the game suffers from weak aspects like its operators, it more than often makes up for it in other areas like its gunsmith, wide array of content, single-player offerings, and free price tag. While the gameplay features a wide selection of content from its slow-paced operations to the more bombastic warfare, Delta Force can often feel a little cheap, and that's my main concern. With such a hardcore focus on weapon skins in a game that's destined for mobile and made by a Chinese publisher, I'm worried that Delta Force will simply become a goldmine for Chinese tech giants, ultimately ruining the soul this game could have. Delta Force checks a lot of boxes and over-delivers in quite a few areas, including its amazing community management. However, I'm worried that all Tencent will eventually focus on is checking boxes to sell us weapon skins instead of creating a true AAA icon. But Existential Crisis aside, Delta Force is damn fun. While it's still a few months away from its console release, give it a try on PC if you can. The game's pretty stable, decently good looking, with acceptable gunplay and a ton of variety for a free-to-play title. So tell me in the comments if you've tried out Delta Force and what you think so far. For all things Battlefield and Delta Force, stay tuned and subscribe, and as always, thank you guys for watching.